Hello and welcome. For the past fortnight, commentators and analysts have been busy trying to figure out what's gone wrong with the India-United States relationship, given the slow response from Washington DC to India's requests for help during the raging COVID-19 pandemic in India, its second wave in fact. That's the topic of discussion, not the COVID pandemic, but the ups and downs of the Indo-U.S. relationship since 1947 and of course in the past 3 or 4 decades. You're on Simply Nitin, I'm Nitin Gokhale. There was much outrage in both India and some of the India watchers in the United States about the slow response and sometimes indifferent response of the US administration officials to requests from the Indian vaccine maker, the Serum Institute of India, for releasing raw material that is required to make the Covishield vaccine and subsequently other vaccines. There was also no tweet, no statement from the top echelons of the US administration during the second surge of the COVID-19 in India, which is deadlier than the first one, which happened in 2020. So there was much outrage and much commentary on why the Biden administration is not stepping up to help what is the strategic partner for United States. India is a valued strategic partner and of course a valued member of the quadrilateral grouping of nations, that is United States, Australia, Japan and India, which is supposedly a grouping of democracies, and of course unstated intention of this grouping is to contain China. And yet the Americans did not step out to either offer help or express sympathy or support to the conditions that the Indians were facing. But much after that outrage, and because of the outrage perhaps, the American administration has woken up and now, in fact, they've gone the other way. They're going overboard. There is multiple inputs coming in that the US administration is going out of its way to provide raw materials for the vaccines, providing PPE kits, providing oxygen generators, also working with Indian health authorities. The Americans would want to put in place some of the protocols that are required and further going for research for what could be a very effective antidote for COVID-19 is being discussed between the two administrations and the people of the two countries. So what is it that actually propelled the dip in the Indo-US relationship? Nobody will know the exact reason, but it is not something new in the history of India-America relationships. If we look back since 1947, but why go back that much? If you look at it from the 1960s till now, the relationship between the Americans and the Indians have always been swinging like a pendulum, wildly from one end to the other. So if you look back to, say, the early 60s, when Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru was ruling India and John F. Kennedy was the President of United States, the relations were excellent. And in fact, during the 1962 war with China, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru actually wrote a panicky letter to the US administration seeking huge military help, which was on its way. But before the aid could come or the military hardware could land in India, the war ended on 20th November 1962. Of course, US helped India in setting up what is called the Aviation Research Center, which is India's technical aviation intelligence agency, and also helped setting up or training the Special Frontier Force, comprising completely of the Tibetans, the exiled Tibetans who are known to be very hardy people, and they are now the special forces under the research and analysis wing. That was the height of cooperation between India and the United States. Come 1965 war with Pakistan, United States actually withdrew and withheld some of the aid to India that they had planned and they had promised. But at the same time, they also did the same thing to Pakistan, annoying both India and Pakistan in the 65 war. Post the 1965 war, President Lyndon Johnson, who took over as the President of United States after assassination of John F. Kennedy, uh, was not very well disposed towards India, and he withheld the food aid to India, enraging a lot of people in India that time. Mrs. Indira Gandhi had become the Prime Minister in 1966, and she was livid. But it is also an American agronomist, Norman Borlaug, who helped India usher in the Green Revolution, which made India self-sufficient in food and brought in food security into India. So it's been a kind of blow hot, blow cold kind of relationship, even in the decade of the 60s. Come 1971, or just before 1971, President Richard Nixon and his National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger were completely against India for various geopolitical reasons. They wanted to support Pakistan, which was helping them to reach out to China. And of course, Nixon had some personal dislike, if I may use the word hatred, against Mrs. Indira Gandhi. And he let it be known to his administration officials, which resulted in the US taking a hostile stand against India during the 1971 war, which liberated East Pakistan, created Bangladesh. But India withstood the pressure thanks to the Soviet Union, which stood behind India very firmly, thanks to the Indo-Soviet Friendship Treaty signed in August 1971. So that was I would say, the nadir of Indo-US relationship in 1971. Post that, of course, there were periods of indifference. There were periods of no contact, or I would say very little contact between the two US administrations. But the US came down heavily on India in 1974. Remember, on 18th May 1974, India exploded its first nuclear device, Pokhran 1 as it is called. And India faced sanctions led by the United States, which was livid that India did not adhere to the non-proliferation treaty that the Americans wanted India to abide by. India had not signed the treaty, of course, but the Americans still wanted India to remain a non-nuclear state. That frost in the relationship continued for some time before Ronald Reagan took over as President of the United States. And Mrs. Gandhi, after a brief 3-year exile, political exile, I would say, and away from power between 1977 and 1980, returned to power as Prime Minister again. And when she went to United States, President Reagan, and she hit off very well, and both of them then started the rejuvenation of the Indo-US relationship. That's what happened. But again, the American administration, like the Indian bureaucracy, is riven with a lot of divisions, a lot of rivalries, and a lot of difference of opinions. But the scientific and the technological community and the military bureaucracy in the United States was against giving India the Cray supercomputer, which India wanted badly to predict the monsoons and, of course, bring in more technology, modern technology to India, which was just coming out of the backward status it had attained for several years after independence. But that did not happen, and it left a bitter taste in the mouth because of the obdurate attitude of the US administration. Then, of course, you had the nuclear explosion again in May 1998, which made India a pariah state, thanks to United States leading the initiative to impose sanctions on India. Scientific community, scientists, the ISRO scientists, everyone were either banned from traveling to European countries and America, and India was denied dual-use technology from these advanced countries. But it was just in 2 years or so, the tide turned, thanks to Strope Talbot and Jaswant Singh on Indian side, who talked to each other so frequently that they came up with a roadmap for India to come out of the isolation and the sanctions. And of course, the tide turned around the beginning of this century. Then, of course, came the Kargil War in 1999, in which US played a mediator's role by forcing Pakistan or Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif to accept the ceasefire or declare a ceasefire with India in Kargil. And then, of course, came the apogee of the Indo-US relationship in the form of the civil nuclear deal, where the 123 agreement was signed and India became a legitimate nuclear power, although not yet a member of the nuclear suppliers group, thanks to the belligerence and the opposition showed by China. But that's a different story. But Bush Jr., George Bush Jr., who was the 43rd President of the United States, actually ushered in the golden years of the Indo-US relationship. Of course, since then, there have been ups and downs again. There was the Obama administration, which had a blow-hot, blow-cold relationship with India. There was the Devayani Khobragade affair in 2013, which again created a lot of fissures between the Indo-US relationship. Then came Donald Trump, who wanted India to be its security partner, the United States security partner, but was very belligerent and very aggressive on India's trade practices. He wanted India's tag of developing country to be taken away in the WTO, or his administration wanted that. So that was the last precedent. Then came the Democratic administration of Joe Biden in January earlier this year, which has traditionally been very hard on India on matters of human rights, on matters of the civil rights, and sometimes the press freedom, which the US administration under a democratic party setup has always been very critical of the Indian establishment. So it wasn't very clear which way the Biden-Modi relationship would go, or Indo-American relationship will go under the current administration. And sure enough, the first signs of the crisis came during the second surge or the second wave of the COVID-19 in April 2021. That again raised hackles, especially amongst India watchers and Indian civil society, Indian social media handles. Now, a lot of people take credit that because of that outrage, the administration has got its act together. Whatever the reason, they have now going overboard, I would say, in giving India the kind of aid and help required to combat the COVID-19 surge and the future challenges that India will face in terms of health, in terms of climate change, in terms of environment, all that India and the US are doing. Of course, the defense partnership is as robust as it has been for the past 20 years or so. And yet, there was a small blip again, where an American ship went past or went through the Indian exclusive economic zone of Lakshadweep, asserting its rights of freedom of passage, freedom of navigation, which again raised hackles in India. So it shows how the relationship between the world's oldest democracy and the world's largest democracy is not as smooth as everyone would like it to be. Of course, many of our bureaucrats and diplomats have said on both sides that in a friendship, in a relationship, it can't be hunky-dory all the way. There would be areas of differences. There would be areas where there will be disputes. But as long as both sides keep engaging and keep talking to each other, these differences and disputes can be resolved, is the understanding in the capitals of both countries. Where we are heading from here, we do not know. But the fact is, I remember one establishment person saying this many years ago, almost a decade ago, that this is the irony of relationship between India and the United States. While people of India and the people of America love each other, and especially the Indians love going to US for their studies, for higher education, for scientific research, and of course the way of life that the Americans lead. And the bureaucrats and their children would love to be in America. The collective wisdom in the deep establishment in India is completely suspicious of the American intentions. Now, this is the contradiction, but that's the way it has evolved. They need each other. Both the countries need each other for whatever geopolitical reasons that we all know. We've been talking about it for so long. But the fact is, this relationship is bittersweet. It is not completely smooth, but it is an important relationship, and therefore, all the outrage, all the commentary one saw over the past fortnight or so was because everyone realizes that this is an important relationship for the world, for the globe, for geopolitics, and for stability across Asia and beyond. And therefore, we are giving this much importance to the Indo-US relationship in this episode of Simply Nitin. That's all I have this week. But remember, keep sending feedback. We have done programs on the Indo-US relationship and the trouble between the two countries, and of course the smoothness of relationship in many aspects. But keep watching all our programs. Of course, keep subscribing to our YouTube channel. Keep sending feedback. And if you want to really know a little more about the ups and downs in this relationship, there are a couple of books I can recommend. One is, of course, Meenakshi Ahmed's book on Indo-US relationship. Then there is Tanvi Madan's The Fateful Triangle, which talks about relationship between India, US and China, and how they have played a role in evolution of the Asian geopolitics. And I'm hoping to read Shiv Shankar Menon, India's former National Security Advisor, also Foreign Secretary, his book on Asian geopolitics, and I hope to have a discussion with him very soon. And there is, of course, my own book on R.N. Kao, the Gentleman's Spy Master, which talks in detail about how the ARC was set up and what help the Americans gave to India in 1962-63. All that is there. And of course, I forget one more book which details the Indo-US relationship and the trouble in 1962. It's by Bruce Riedel, which talks about John F. Kennedy's help to India in those years. That's all I have this week. We'll come back again next week. Until then, it's goodbye.